Number 1. The Hell's Bells of El Zapote. Picture a flooded shaft of water south of Puerto Morelos on Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. It is only about 30 meters deep. The water near the surface is fresh and clear. Go down and the light fades to a dim, tea-colored gloom. And there, hanging in the dark, are giant cones of pale stone. They flare downward like melted candles or like the bells of brass trumpets, hollow and open at their wide bottoms. Some reach 2 meters long. Divers name them the Hell's Bells. Here's the problem. Stalactites are not supposed to do this. The stone icicles you see in a dry cave form when mineral-rich water drips through air. They grow downward, yes, but they taper to a point and they need air to exist. The Hell's Bells grow underwater, they flare outward, they follow none of the usual rules. The geoscientist Wolfgang Stinisbeck of Heidelberg University led the team that studied them closely from around 2016. In a 2017 paper in the journal Sedimentology, his group argued that these formations grow while fully submerged. That single claim overturned a basic assumption about how cave stone works. The secret is a boundary. In this blue hole, fresh water floats on top of denser salt water, and where they meet sits a sharp layer called the halocline. The Hell's Bells cluster exactly there, between roughly 28 and 38 meters down. The water at that depth is nearly free of oxygen. Microbes living along the boundary appear to drive the calcite to crystallize, building the bells layer by layer in near total darkness. Step outside that narrow chemical band, and the bells simply stop forming. They are prisoners of their own boundary. El Zapote holds the largest known concentration of these structures anywhere on Earth, which makes it a natural laboratory. The same site gave up another secret. Down in its sediment, researchers found the skeleton of an extinct giant ground sloth, an animal that walked this land when it was dry. We will come back to why blue holes preserve bones so well. The bells are fragile, a careless fin kick can snap one loose, so the site is protected, and divers approach on rebreathers with careful gas planning. Scientists still debate how much of the work is microbial and how much is plain chemistry at the density boundary. But the lesson is already clear. A blue hole is not just a drowned cave. It can be a factory, quietly manufacturing entirely new kinds of stone in the dark, and if it can build something this strange, what else might be waiting further down? Number 2. The Sawmill Sink Bone Graveyard. On Great Abaco Island in the Bahamas, there is an inland blue hole called Sawmill Sink. From the surface, it looks like an ordinary dark pond. Beneath it lies one of the richest fossil graveyards in the entire Caribbean. The story came together through two people. The cave diver Brian Cockhook knew the hole intimately. The paleontologist David Stedman of the Florida Museum of Natural History knew what the bones meant. From around 2004 onward, they began bringing the dead back to the surface. What they found is staggering. Resting in the sediment were the remains of an extinct tortoise, Chelonoidus alburiorum, known as Alberry's tortoise. There were bones of the Cuban crocodile, Crocodilus rhombifer, a predator that once lived around this wetland. There were more than 25 species of birds, several of them now extinct, and there were human remains, the bones of the Lucayan people, the first islanders, dated to around 1,000 years old. Why is any of this still here? The answer is the same toxic chemistry we will keep meeting. Below the freshwater lens, Sawmill Sink holds a thick layer of water laced with hydrogen sulfide and stripped of oxygen. Nothing that needs oxygen can live in it. No scavengers, no rot. A fine, soft sediment seals everything that falls in. One tortoiseshell preserved not only its shape, but original keratin and even DNA, which is almost unheard of for a fossil in the tropics. A layer of peat in the hole trapped leaves, seeds, and pollen, building a snapshot of what the island looked like before people arrived. So the blue hole records not just animals, but an entire vanished ecosystem. David Stedman used this site to make a pointed argument. Many of these species disappeared right around the time humans first reached the islands. The timing suggests that people, not climate alone, drove these creatures to extinction. The hole became a crime scene that recorded the loss. Recovering the bones meant diving down through that poisonous sulfide layer, a genuine hazard we will examine on its own. The deposit spanned from the late Pleistocene into the more recent Holocene, capturing exactly the window when the world changed. Scientists compare the preservation here to tar pits and to permafrost, the gold standards for keeping the past intact. A blue hole, then, can act as a sealed morgue. It catches what falls in, smothers it in airless water, and holds it for thousands of years. The crocodiles and the people of Abaco were swallowed by the dark and kept there, waiting. And the thing doing the keeping is the very layer that nearly kills the divers who go looking. Number 3, the hydrogen sulfide death cloud. We have mentioned the toxic layer twice now. It deserves its own chapter because it is the dark heart of almost every blue hole. Start with the water itself. Fresh rainwater is light, so it floats. Salt water is dense, so it sinks. Where the two meet, they do not mix easily. They form a sharp boundary called a halocline. In many blue holes, the water below that boundary is completely cut off from the air above. Oxygen runs out. And in that airless zone, bacteria go to work and produce hydrogen sulfide, the gas that smells of rotten eggs. Seen from the water, this layer can look like a milky, shimmering cloud hanging in mid-water, or a smoky haze, or an oily mirror. Divers can literally watch it. Light bends as it crosses the density change, so the boundary gleams like the surface of a second hidden sea. Hydrogen sulfide is not a mild nuisance. It is acutely toxic. It attacks the body the way cyanide does by blocking the cells from using oxygen. Divers who pass through the cloud describe the sulfur smell creeping in through their gear, a sudden change in temperature, and the visibility shifting around them. They move through it quickly and try not to stir the sediment that feeds the bacteria below. Above the line, the water can be clear and full of life. Below it, the water is dead for any animal that needs to breathe. But it is not empty. It teems with chemical-eating microbes arranged in tight layers, sulfur oxidizers stacked above sulfate reducers, each living off the waste of the other. This is the same kind of poisoned, oxygen-free deep water found in the Black Sea and in certain still lakes around the world. In a blue hole, it is concentrated into a single vertical shaft, sometimes with several stacked layers like shelves of different chemistry, with curtains of bacteria hanging from each boundary. The depth of this toxic layer is not fixed. Rainfall and climate raise or lower the freshwater lens, so the death cloud rises and falls with the seasons and the centuries. Here is the twist that makes it matter. The very thing that endangers divers is the thing that preserves the past. No oxygen means no decay. The sulfide cloud is both executioner and embalmer. It killed nothing and saved everything in Sawmill sink. It stores thousands of years of organic material in chemical suspension. So when you hear that, a blue hole is a perfect time capsule, this cloud is the lid. And to reach what it protects, someone has to swim through it. Number 4, the Bushman's whole body recovery. Not every blue hole is in the tropics. In the northern Cape of South Africa lies a flooded sinkhole called Bosman's Gat, which means Bushman's hole. It is freshwater, and it is deep. Estimates put its floor somewhere around 270 to 290 meters down, which places it among the deepest freshwater caves known on Earth. In 1994, a young diver named Dion Dreyer blacked out at about 50 meters and was lost. His body sank far beyond reach into the cold and the dark, and stayed there. For more than a decade, the hole kept him. In January of 2005, an experienced Australian technical diver named David Shaw decided to bring Dreyer home. Shaw was diving on a closed-circuit rebreather going to around 270 meters depths that almost no one had attempted on that kind of equipment. The plan was to spend only a few minutes at the bottom, locate the body, and begin the long climb back. It went wrong. At depth, working hard in near-zero visibility, Shaw became entangled with the body and the lines. The effort and the extreme conditions overwhelmed him, and he died there, far below the surface. The dive had been filmed by his own helmet camera and by the support team above, so the tragedy was documented in unflinching detail. Then came the eerie part. As the recovery lines were finally retrieved, both bodies came up together, Shaw and the man he had gone down to save surfacing side by side. The story was later told in full in Philip Finch's book Diving into Darkness, published in 2008. Everything about Bosman's Gat conspires against a diver. It sits at altitude, around 1,500 meters above sea level, which throws off the decompression math. At extreme depth, breathing gas becomes thick and hard to move, narcosis clouds the mind, and the body faces high-pressure nervous syndrome. A few minutes on the bottom can demand hours of slow decompression on the way up. The water is cold and silty, and once disturbed, the visibility collapses to nothing. The site had earlier drawn the diver Nuno Gomes, who set deep records there in the 1990s. But after Shaw, the lesson was hard and permanent. Recovering a body from that kind of depth is now widely judged simply too dangerous to try. The case is taught as a warning about ambition and task loading, about how quickly a calm plan unravels in the dark. A blue hole does not just take the curious. Sometimes it takes the ones who come to bring them back. Number 5. The Hurricane Archive. Now turn from death to memory, because a blue hole is also a recording device, and what it records can be read like the rings of a tree. In calm conditions, fine sediment drifts down through a blue hole and settles on the floor in thin, even layers, building up slowly over years and decades. Then, a powerful hurricane arrives. The storm tears across the shallows and flushes a surge of coarse sand and broken coral into the hole. That heavier material drops to the bottom and leaves a distinct light-colored band in the mud. Stack enough of these storm layers on top of each other, and you get a calendar of hurricanes reaching back thousands of years. Scientists call this study paleotempestology, the study of ancient storms. The researcher, Jeffrey Donnelly, of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, has been central to this work, along with many collaborators. They have cored blue holes like the Blackwood Sinkhole on Abaco, sites off South Andros in the Bahamas, and locations near Belize. To do it, they push long tubes deep into the sediment, pull up an intact column of layered mud, slice it open, photograph it, and date it using radiocarbon. What they read in those layers is sobering. The records stretch back well over 1,000 years, in some cases several thousand. They reveal long stretches of intense hurricane activity and long quiet spells in between. And crucially, some of those ancient active periods appear more violent than anything in the modern record. That matters because reliable written hurricane records only go back about 170 years. The blue holes extend our view far beyond what any logbook can offer. By measuring grain size and the tiny fossils in each band, researchers can even estimate how strong a given storm was and where it came from. The airless bottom water helps by preserving clean, undisturbed layers that can be counted with confidence. The patterns connect to the big levers of climate, like the position of the tropical rain belt and the temperature of the sea surface. Researchers, including Lisa Greer and Tyler Winkler, have widened the network of cored holes, and a 2021 study using a South Andros blue hole flagged ancient stretches of unusually fierce activity. To trust the method, scientists tested against known storms, and the holes do record identifiable hurricanes from recent centuries. The unsettling takeaway is that the Atlantic has produced megastorms beyond anything we have measured and may do so again. A circle of dark water, it turns out, has been quietly keeping the planet's weather diary all along. Number 6. The Drowned Ice Age Stalactites. Here is one of the most haunting sights a diver can meet inside a blue hole. Hundreds of feet underwater, the walls and ceilings of some caverns are hung with long, pointed stalactites. The same stone icicles you would expect in a dry cave on land. They have no business being underwater, and that is exactly the point. Stalactites only grow in air. They need water to drip through an open, air-filled cave so that mineral can build up drop by drop. So when you find them deep below the sea, you are looking at undeniable proof that this place was once dry, open, and far above the waves. The explanation lies in the ice ages. During the last glacial maximum, about 20,000 years ago, enormous volumes of water were locked up in continental ice sheets. With so much water frozen on land, sea level stood roughly 120 meters lower than it does today. The carbonate platforms of the Bahamas, the Yucatan, and Belize stood exposed as dry land. Caves opened in that rock, and inside them, stalactites and stalagmites slowly grew. Then the ice melted. Through the Holocene, the seas rose and climbed back over the land, flooding those caves and drowning their decorations exactly where they stood. The Great Blue Hole of Belize, which we will reach shortly, holds large stalactites at depths of around 40 to 50 meters, and some of them lean at odd angles, recording the moment the cave roof began to collapse. These drowned formations are far more than scenery. Scientists can date them precisely using uranium and thorium, which pins down when the cave was dry and therefore when the sea was low. The growth layers inside each stalactite record Sturkawir, ancient rainfall, temperature, and plant life through their chemistry. The oxygen locked in the calcite tracks past climate like a thermometer buried in stone. Tilted and broken formations mark phases when the chamber partly caved in. Multiple generations of stone, layered over one another, mark repeated cycles of flooding and re-exposure across different ice ages. In the Bahamas, some holes preserve speleothems from more than one glacial cycle, stacked like chapters. For a diver, the effect is unforgettable, like swimming through a frozen cathedral that the ocean swallowed whole. For a scientist, these are among the best archives we have of where the sea stood in the deep past, used to calibrate the very curves that describe how oceans rise and fall. A single dive connects you to a story 100,000 years long. Number 7. The Extremophiles that mirror alien life. We keep calling the lower water of a blue hole dead. For animals, that is true. But for the smallest forms of life, that toxic, lightless water is one of the most interesting places on the planet, and it may hold clues to life beyond Earth. Down below the halocline, where there is no oxygen and no sunlight, microbes thrive anyway. They cannot photosynthesize, so they do something more ancient. They draw energy straight from chemistry, feeding on hydrogen sulfide and methane, in a process called chemosynthesis. They build dense mats and slick biofilms, and they hang in cloud-like layers right along the chemical boundary. This is where the story leaves Earth for a moment. Teams working with astrobiology programs, including work tied to NASA, study these communities as stand-ins for life that might exist on the icy moons of the outer solar system. Worlds like Europa, a moon of Jupiter, and Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, are thought to hide oceans beneath their frozen shells, dark and airless and salty. The chemistry of a blue hole's deep water is one of the closest, most accessible matches we have. The Bahamian blue holes, in particular, were studied under exobiology programs through the 2000s and 2010s. Researchers found layered microbial communities that echo stromatolites, the ancient structures built by microbes on the early Earth, long before animals existed. In effect, descending into a blue hole is like descending into the planet's distant past, when chemistry, not sunlight, ran the world. Some of these microbes are entirely new to science, with metabolic tricks we are only beginning to understand. Sulfur-eating bacteria can even precipitate minerals out of the water, which links them directly back to the Hell's Bells we started with. Life and stone, building each other in the dark. By sequencing the DNA from these mats, scientists are finding deep, unfamiliar branches of the tree of life. The communities cycle sulfur, nitrogen, and carbon in tightly stacked layers, each microbe handing its waste to the next. They are stable over very long timescales, which lets highly specialized life evolve in isolation. The bigger lesson reaches past biology. If life can persist here, at the very edge of available energy, in poison and darkness, then our assumptions about where life can exist need to widen. The search for life on other worlds is partly a search for places like this, so the death cloud is not only an embalmer and a hazard, it is a living library and possibly a preview of what we might one day find beneath an alien sea. Number 8, the hidden cave networks. Look down into a blue hole and you see a simple dark circle. What you do not see is that the circle is often just a doorway, the single visible mouth of a sprawling system of flooded tunnels threading for kilometers through the rock. The Bahamas and the Yucatan contain some of the longest underwater cave systems on Earth. In Mexico, the Sistema Sac-Actun, linked to cenotes that behave much like blue holes, exceeds 370 kilometers of mapped water-filled passage. On Andros Island in the Bahamas, blue holes connect to tidal cave networks so extensive that they seem to breathe, drawing water in and pushing it out as the tides turn. Exploring them is one of the most dangerous activities in the world. There is no GPS underwater and no way to see far in the silt, so divers lay a continuous guideline behind them, a thin thread back to the entrance. The defining danger is the overhead. In open water, a diver in trouble can rise straight to the surface. In a cave, solid rock seals the ceiling, and the only way out is the way you came. Divers have died after losing the line, running out of breathing gas, or kicking up a cloud of silt that erased all visibility in an instant. These passages were dissolved out of the limestone over many thousands of years following cracks and weak layers in the rock. Some hold their own haloclines, their own fossil deposits, their own drowned stalactites. They can run kilometers away from the visible opening, and most of them, worldwide, have never been mapped at all. In the ocean-connected holes, the tidal currents can become strong enough to trap a diver against the rock. The Andros systems were pioneered by explorers like Rob Palmer in the 1980s and 90s. The risk in this field is never abstract. Palmer himself disappeared while diving in the Red Sea in 1997. Cave surveys keep revealing how inland holes and offshore holes connect underground, forming hidden links across whole landscapes. The isolation of these tunnels breeds strange life. Blind and colorless creatures found nowhere else. The hard truth of these networks is the geometry. A wrong turn can be fatal even when safety is only a few meters away if you cannot find the line that leads there. Divers manage the danger with staged decompression and multiple redundant supplies of gas. And still, new passages and new connections are found every single year. The dark circle at the surface is the smallest part of the story. The maze beneath it is the rest. Number 9. Dean's Blue Hole and the Freediving Deaths. On Long Island in the Bahamas, near the town of Clarencetown, the water in a quiet bay does something dramatic. It runs shallow and turquoise for a while, and then the bottom simply drops away into a wide, dark throat of water. This is Dean's Blue Hole, and at about 202 meters or 663 feet, it was long considered the deepest known seawater blue hole in the world. That sheer vertical drop, reachable straight from shore, turned it into the global capital of competitive freediving, the sport of descending on a single breath of air with no tank. It became the home of the vertical blue competition. The New Zealand freediver William Trubridge set world records here, including a descent to 102 meters with no fins at all, pulling himself down and back on a single lungful of air. To do this, the body performs something remarkable. The mammalian dive reflex slows the heart and shunts blood to the core. At depth, the lungs compress to a small fraction of their size at the surface, but the same conditions that make the sport possible make it lethal. The great danger is shallow water blackout, when a diver's oxygen crashes near the end of the climb, often within sight of the surface, and they simply lose consciousness. There is also lung squeeze and the risk of decompression injury. In November of 2013, the American freediver Nicholas Mavoli died at Dean's Blue Hole after an attempt to reach 72 meters. It was the first death in a sanctioned competition under the freediving body known as ID, and it forced the sport to confront its safety practices. The cruelty of a blackout is its timing. It strikes during the ascent when the diver is almost home, as the pressure drops and the oxygen in the blood falls below what the brain can use. Safety divers wade in the water and divers wear a lanyard clipped to the line, but rescuing someone from deep on a breath hold is extraordinarily hard. There is no air to give them down there. The clear water and the easy shore access are exactly what make the site perfect for repeated record attempts, and that is the paradox. The same beauty that draws the world's best athletes is wrapped around a column of water that does not forgive a mistake. Narcosis and pressure can cloud judgment even without breathing gas. Dean's Blue Hole is a stage and an arena, a place where humans walk right up to the edge of what the body can do. Sometimes, the edge gives way. Number 10. The Great Blue Hole of Belize. We end the countdown with the most famous blue hole on Earth, the one you have almost certainly seen from the air, a perfect dark navy circle ringed by pale turquoise reef. It sits near the center of Lighthouse Reef, about 70 kilometers off the coast of Belize. It measures roughly 318 meters across and about 124 meters deep. Its fame began with Jacques Cousteau, who brought his ship, the Calypso, here in 1971 and ranked it among the great dive sites of the world. Like the others, it is a drowned cave, formed when Ice Age seas were low and this was dry land. The proof hangs at depth where large stalactites at around 40 to 50 meters lean at angles, recording both its dry birth and the later collapse of its roof. For all its fame, the inside of the hole stayed mysterious until recently. In December of 2018, an expedition that included Richard Branson, Fabien Cousteau, the grandson of Jacques, and the submersible pilot Erica Berman descended in small submarines and mapped the interior in full for the first time, building a complete three-dimensional sonar image. What they found turned the postcard sinister. At around 90 meters, they passed through a layer of hydrogen sulfide, and below it, the water was anoxic, completely without oxygen, dark and utterly still. Nothing that breathes can live down there. On the floor, they found what the team called a graveyard of conch shells, the remains of animals that had tumbled or wandered over the edge, sunk through the toxic layer, and been unable to climb back out. They also reported what they believed could be human remains, and, even at that isolated depth, pieces of plastic debris. That toxic layer acts like a chemical floor, sealing off the living upper water from the dead deep below. Anything that falls past it is trapped, which is exactly why the conch graveyard exists. The hole is part of the Belize Barrier Reef Reserve System and is protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Divers visit its upper reaches, but the anoxic basement is hazardous and off-limits to ordinary diving. The stalactites tie it straight back to the Bahamas and the Yucatan, the same drowned karst story playing out across the tropics. The 2018 mapping carried a quieter warning. 2. That our plastic now reaches even the most remote, deep places on the planet. The Great Blue Hole is beautiful from above and grim at the bottom, and in that contrast it stands as the emblem of every sinister thing these holes can hide. So how does a feature like this come to exist in the first place? Every blue hole begins not in water, but in rock and rain. The tropical platforms of the Bahamas, the Yucatan, and Belize are built of carbonate, mostly old limestone. Rainwater is slightly acidic, and over very long spans of time it seeps into that rock and dissolves it, hollowing out caves and chambers below the surface. The crucial phase comes during the ice ages, when sea level drops far below today's mark. With the platforms exposed as dry land, air fills the caves, water drips through them, and stalactites grow. Then the chamber's ceiling, undermined by dissolving rock, collapses, opening a roughly circular, vertical shaft. When the ice melts and the seas climb back, the shaft floods, and a blue hole is born. Once flooded, the water organizes itself. A lens of light fresh water floats on top of heavier salt water, and the stage is set for the halocline and the anoxic depths. Inland holes and ocean holes differ mainly in whether they connect to the sea and feel the tides. The near-circular shape comes from the even way the roof gives way. The depth is inherited from the ancient water table and the size of the collapse. This single process explains nearly everything we have seen. The drowned stalactites, the stacked sea level records, the toxic layers, the trapping of bones and shells, all of it follows from a cave that filled with water. Scientists debate the details, whether a given hole owes more to slow dissolution or sudden collapse, and most are a blend of both. The full timescale runs from tens of thousands of years for the flooding to millions of years for the original dissolving of the rock. It also explains why holes cluster on old reef platforms, where the chemistry and the sea level history line up just right, and why the same pattern repeats from the Bahamas to Belize to the blue holes of the Red Sea. No two are identical because each inherited a slightly different cave in a slightly different collapse. But the frame is the same everywhere. A blue hole is a drowned landscape, a piece of the ice age world that the rising ocean reached out and swallowed. That birth story also explains why blue holes are such extraordinary keepers of the past. The key is that the water stops mixing. Once a light freshwater lens settles over dense salt water, the layers stay separate, and the deep water sits still and undisturbed for centuries. In that stillness, oxygen runs out. Without oxygen, the bacteria and the chemistry of decay grind to a halt, and the scavengers that would normally tear a carcass apart cannot survive to do it. Fine sediment drifts down and seals whatever has fallen in. Hydrogen sulfide, the same gas that threatens divers, floods the dead zone and helps lock everything in place. The result is preservation that borders on the miraculous. Bone survives. So do wood, leather, pollen, seeds, and in rare cases, even DNA and soft tissue, as the Sawmill sink tortoise showed. The annual layers of storm sediment stay neatly stacked and countable. The microbial mats themselves record the chemistry of their time. Scientists rank these sites alongside tar pits, peat bogs, and permafrost as the finest natural archives on Earth. The catch is that the archive is fragile. To read it, researchers must sample without churning the layers into chaos, and the whole system depends on the stratification holding steady. A shift in climate that deepens or breaks the layers can disturb the record. The deep lesson is a strange one. The very toxicity that makes a blue hole deadly is the same toxicity that makes it priceless. The cloud that kills is the cloud that remembers. For all we have learned, blue holes remain stubbornly out of reach. Most of the cave passages that branch from them, worldwide, have never been mapped. The deepest holes drop well past the limits of safe human diving, so their floors stay beyond direct sight. The toxic layers block easy access to the bottom. And in tidal holes, the currents can make a descent simply too dangerous to attempt. Even our machines struggle. Remotely operated vehicles can be tangled or blinded in tight, silty passages, and many holes have never been surveyed by any vehicle at all. New holes keep turning up, and the true depth of some is still uncertain, as the recent debate over the record depth of certain holes shows. The microbial life down there is largely uncatalogued. Fossil deposits still wait unrecovered in water too poisonous to work in for long. And then there are the bodies that were never brought back, resting on floors no one can safely reach. The connections between holes are still being traced, one careful dive at a time, often limited as much by funding and access as by the danger itself. The bottom of many holes has never been photographed even once. Each barrier is its own kind, physical, chemical, and logistical, and each answered question seems to open 3 more. A single newly mapped passage can rewrite our picture of how an entire system links together. The scale of what we do not know about these holes still dwarfs what we do, which is exactly why they keep pulling explorers back. The gap, though, is narrowing because the tools are getting better fast. The 2018 Belize expedition is a preview of the future, using crude submersibles to go where divers cannot, and multi-beam sonar to build complete 3-dimensional maps of a hole's interior. Remotely operated and autonomous vehicles now reach passages that would kill a person, and closed-circuit rebreathers extend how far and how long trained divers can work. On the science side, coring rigs pull up the storm archives, DNA sequencing catalogs microbes that have never been named, and dating methods using uranium, thorium, and radiocarbon pin events to specific moments in deep time. Photogrammetry stitches thousands of images into precise reconstructions of passages and formations, and isotope analysis reads ancient climate straight from the stone. What makes the field move is collaboration, geologists, biologists, and archaeologists working the same hole from different angles, alongside the cave divers who actually lay the line into new passage. A single core can serve a climate scientist studying storms and an archaeologist dating human arrival at the same time, so one dive can answer questions in 3 fields at once. Astrobiology funding, including work linked to NASA, keeps the extremophile research alive. Remote sensing from aircraft and satellites even helps spot new holes from above, and new conservation tools help protect the fragile sites once they are found. Each instrument turns a hazard into data. The limits have not vanished, but the next decade may reveal more about these drowned worlds than the entire century before it. Step back from the countdown, and a single picture emerges. Every blue hole is a wound in the limestone that's slowly filled with time. Inside that wound, geology, climate, life, and death are bound together in a way you find almost nowhere else on Earth. The same toxic water that kills the unwary is the water that preserves the record. These holes remember storms that struck before any person wrote a word, seas that stood far lower than today, and animals and people who vanished from the islands long ago. They build stone in total darkness. They open onto mazes we cannot fully enter. They shelter life so strange it doubles as a rehearsal for the oceans of other worlds. They record the weather of centuries no person ever measured, and they hold the bones of creatures no person ever saw alive. They are at once a grave and an archive. Human ambition keeps testing their edges, and each generation reaches a little deeper, mapping a little more, dating a little further back. And still the unknown vastly outweighs the known. What falls into a blue hole is rarely returned. It is recorded, held in airless dark, waiting. The sea, it seems, keeps a far longer memory than we do. The next time you see that perfect dark circle from above, remember that its stillness is a kind of disguise, and that everything it has ever swallowed is still down there, perfectly kept in the quiet.